Olivia Sparkhall, welcome to the Singing Teachers Talk podcast, and congratulations on the publication of your book, A Young Person's Guide to Vocal Health. Can you share with us first, before we delve into the book, a little bit about your backstory and how we can understand how you came to be a singer and a composer, an arranger, and now an author?
It's lovely to meet you, Alexa. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, so I've been working as a secondary school teacher and as a choir director for 20 years. And I came to realise over my time that there were lots of questions that children had about their voices and about singing in general. And over the years, I started realising that the same questions were coming up time and time again. And then a few years ago, when I was taking part an MA in voice pedagogy, I started to think, well, this is probably an area that I could research, and started to make a note of the questions that I was being asked. And that was really why this whole thing came about in the first place.
What was the catalyst for you writing a book in particular, and not something like a YouTube film or making a poster?
Yeah, so I did actually start off thinking that I might just produce worksheets, and then perhaps that evolved into a booklet, and then it's something that grew and grew. And actually, it was during lockdown, the summer holiday of lockdown, where there wasn't really anything else to do, that I thought that what I had created probably could evolve into an actual book that would have perhaps a bit more longevity and be something that teachers and students and choir directors could get hold of and then have on their shelves or have in their teaching rooms as a aide-memoire, and also as something to consult.
Your book relates certain things to the life of the young person. For example, there are quotes from young people included. And in the chapter on hydration, you talk about taking a drink at break times and lunch times, or finishing 500 millilitres before your first lesson. Why did you want to talk to young singers in particular?
Yeah, so that's very much been my world ever since qualifying as a secondary school teacher. And I had a little look around what was available, and there are books on vocal health aimed at adults and books on singing in general aimed at adults, but there just wasn't really anything aimed at young people, written for young people to read. And I just felt that that was something that was missing and something that would be well received. So you're absolutely right. I asked the young people themselves to say what they thought a book of this nature should contain. And through that process, I received quotes from ideas from them. And in fact, several were really generous with their time and got involved in the actual creation of the book, because they really felt passionately that this is something that could represent them. So I'm very lucky to have that opportunity. In academia, we call it action research. So that opportunity to actually research with the students themselves, and then hopefully produce a book that children everywhere will really find useful and helpful.
Out of those people that you were speaking to as part of your active research, what was the main thing that was coming up for them in terms of their own vocal health and vocal questions?
Yes, it's really interesting, actually. So the question I had been asked over and over again, really before the book was even conceived, was for help. Because I think children never really think about their voices until something goes wrong. And it was often perhaps on the day of the concert or leading up to the concert or performance or singing exam that children would perhaps find something was wrong with their voices. Maybe they weren't singing their best, or they weren't sure why it wasn't sounding as good as it normally does, or they typically had a sore throat or hoarseness. And that was when they would come to me as their teacher or as their choir director or as the person organising the concert and say, help me, what can I do? And often it's a little bit late at that stage on the day of the concert to be giving this sort of advice, which is, I think, why the book focuses so much on prevention and good habits.
As you say, this has been your world. You've worked with young people for a long time. You've been a secondary school music teacher for 24 years. What did you learn about young people in that time, the way they learn, the way they think, what their world encompasses, that helped to inform the way this book was going to be created?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because what I learned is less is more when it comes to this age group, particularly with some of the younger children, but also really with, I think, with all of the children and young people that I was working with. And a lot of what I was doing in the process was paring down and trying to reduce pages to the bare minimum each time, and use graphics as well to speak for me. And the other thing that was really interesting, and I hadn't really realised how important this was until the children started getting involved, was the use of colour, and to use different colours to mean different aspects of vocal health. And they really encouraged me with this. I would never have come up with the idea myself, I don't think. And the children were most emphatic that I should use different colours to represent different aspects of the book, which was really very helpful. And it's gone down really well with everyone who has given me feedback.
Yeah, it's a really great idea to put that colour coding in there so that even when you're through chapters towards the end of the book, you're still referencing anatomical landmarks or something to do with hydration or cool downs. So yeah, I can see why that would be really helpful to the young person reading it. Voice is so vast. There's so many details that we could include. And as you say, this wasn't going to be an encyclopedia of vocal health. It just wouldn't have attracted your target audience. So how did you decide what information you put in and how much detail you were going to include?
Yes, it was a tricky one because I was trying to write for quite a wide age range. So I was thinking about what sort of child would need a book like this. And it really ranged from sort of primary school age children up. So, we know there's lots of children in this country who are choristers in cathedrals and churches, and they sing a lot, and they would really benefit from knowing about vocal health. And then there's lots of children in their teenage years who sing in choirs and in bands, and they need to know about it too. And then there are those who, at the end of their time at school, think about going on to do a music-related degree or further training. So perhaps off to conservatoire or music college, and they need to know about looking after their voice. So it was really thinking about a book that would appeal from sort of age 8 or 9 all the way up to sort of 18 plus. And try to be careful with the language so that it wasn't patronising or condescending, just easy to understand. And that's why I used those post-it notes to give little definitions of words, which I knew some of my younger children might not know. And that's why there's a glossary as well, so you can look up things in the back. And then as far as what to leave out, well, it was really shaped by asking a whole load of young people what they thought the book should contain. So asking them what they wanted to know about looking after their voice. And I tried to answer all of their questions. And some of their questions were questions that I hadn't even personally considered or realised might come up. So it was very much about listening to the children and hearing their questions and making a note of their questions over a reasonable period of time, and then making sure that I answered them all. And then there are a few extra things as well. So my publisher thought it would be a good idea to include a section on anatomy, which I hadn't originally intended to include, but I can absolutely see why that is so useful. And so we worked together to make sure that was as simplified as it could be while still being truthful.
Yes, and it certainly isn't overwhelming. Even as a new teacher who may be brand new to this information as well, actually that wouldn't be overwhelming for them to kind of stick a toe in the water to start with, if you like.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. What level of prior vocal understanding or experience of singing do you think a reader needs before they get the most out of your book?
It's an interesting question. I think most people who would read it or even think to open it would probably already be doing some sort of singing or potentially acting, or maybe just in their young life have found that their voice doesn't seem right or feels different or sounds different from others. So I think there could be a variety of motivations for getting hold of the book in the first place. But I envisage that the majority are going to be singing, either just singing in primary school choir or church choir, or for older children, perhaps in a youth choir, or having singing lessons. I mean, a lot of the children that read the book, I've heard, are those who are having singing lessons. So they're already a little bit interested in that, or they might be young actors or involved in a sort of stage group or that sort of. I mean, there's quite lots of children who are involved in some musical theatre and dance and and anything sort of art, performing arts related, I guess.
Where are they finding access to the book? Are they going through a library, or have their teachers introduced it to them? Has it been through social media?
Yes, there have been a few social media posts, but we're really in the early days at the moment. It's only been published a few weeks, and I think it's not quite as widely available yet as I hope it's going to be. I know my publisher's working on that, and I do know that it is available internationally. So I've come across some readers in Australia, which is really exciting. And someone's been in touch with me from Australia, which is lovely. The Royal School of Church Music in Australia has, in fact, wanted to review a copy for their magazine, and also in America as well. And someone bought a copy in India recently, and then got in touch to tell me, which is rather lovely. So it's available internationally, and it's being purchased internationally. But UK wise, at the moment, it's available directly from the publisher, which is great. I have a few copies. So I'm more than happy to people to get in touch with me via social media, and I'll pop it in a post. And really recently, only a couple of weeks ago, Banks Music Publications, which is a wonderful music shop that specialises in mail order of all sorts of sheet music, they now have copies too. And I know plenty of people have been buying from them, which is really helpful because you can buy your sheet music and you can buy a few copies of the book at the same time, which I think is brilliant.
What have been some of the responses that you've had from readers so far?
It's been so lovely. Some of them have been completely unsolicited. People have just got in touch with me who I don't know via various social media channels, just to say, got the book, think it's brilliant, congratulations. I think it's really lovely. A few people have just got in touch to offer reviews, which has been fantastic. And I've used some of their quotes in some of my social media posts as well. And I know that my publisher has been sending out copies to some of the national magazines, and that they've been in touch asking for copies as well. So I hope in the next 6 months or so that there'll be some reviews. And then I think that will hopefully appeal to a wider audience, because more people will know that the book exists. And I'd love it to be in primary school and secondary school libraries. I think that would be great. And I'd love singing teachers to get hold of a few copies as well, so that we can just spread the word a bit more.
You've spoken about the research process, a little bit about the active research that you did. What other research did you have to do to create the content? And what was one of your favourite resources or people that you came across or interviewed?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I began this process as part of an MA in voice pedagogy with Voice Study Centre, which is affiliated to University of Wales, Trinity St David, who together are a brilliant team who just support those of us who are really interested in doing further research on the voice just superbly. And they have fantastic tutors and links to some amazing lecturers, again, worldwide, which is really fantastic. So that's been great. Now, those lecturers and professionals write research papers, and so I get to read those. And I did a lot of research, reading papers that have been written over the last 20 years or so, actually, on various different aspects of voice health, some to do with children and some just generic as well. And I was careful to make sure that I got hold of all the books that have been written on this subject. Most of them written with an adult audience in mind, but there are a few that are sort of aimed at a younger audience as well, perhaps at a student age. So, it's really important, I think, to do your research properly when you're writing something like this. Much more reading and much more writing than ended up going into the book. And then particular areas that came up where the children were asking me questions and I didn't have any expertise, I then had to sort of set out to research that area in particular. So there's some really interesting things. I didn't really realise about the chlorine in swimming pools being drying and how it's important to make sure you hydrate after swimming. I was kind of aware that you kind of felt thirsty after swimming, but I sort of assumed that was because of the exercise, and it didn't really occur to me that was a thing, but it's a thing. And yeah, so some of those areas became were really interesting to research, and I became much more aware of some of the issues, and also some of the issues to do with, if you are taking part in sports, safe ways of using your voice in sports. And there's a particular author, Jenevora Williams, who's written a book about teaching singing to young people, where she covers that in particular. And I found it very useful. I also looked into some papers on sports science as well, separately to that. So I felt that I really had well researched every area before I put. So in other words, the book is based on peer reviewed research, which is really, really important. Particularly with my academic hat on, I felt that was an important aspect to cover.
Yeah, we're a big fan of Jenevora Williams here as well. And yes, actually, when I was reading about the swimming, that was a piece of information that was new to me. I hadn't had any experience with it, but that's probably because I only can do about one lap and then I'm out. To be honest, on these podcasts, I'm presenting myself as a very unfit person. Can't do shot put, which was in our conversation with Duncan Rock. Swimming, no. So yeah, I do exercise, people. It's okay. The process of creating a book or a piece of content is very different for each individual, whether that's writing first thing in the morning or becoming nocturnal and writing in the dead of night. What was the writing process like for you?
The writing process was somewhat different from the research process. So lots and lots of reading at random times of the day, really, probably late at night, actually, to be honest with you. Yes, a huge amount of research was obviously key to the success of the validity of this book. So that's really important to me. And then the writing took part in that long school summer holiday when we were in lockdown and there was limited opportunities for us to do anything. There was very little culture available, so we couldn't go to... I love going to the theatre. I love seeing musicals. I love going to the proms in the summer. All of that was off limits. There just weren't the normal entertainment available. We could go for walks, which is great. But apart from that, I had a lot of time on my hands that I dedicated to the writing aspect of the book. And it does take a long time. You're absolutely right. And you do need to dedicate time. But that year was a year where I had much more time available to me than perhaps any other year of my life. So sort of forced lockdown enabled me to create that book. And it's rather wonderful that something creative came out of that very uncreative time nationally.
Definitely. And I guess with that, you didn't have to carve out special focused time for the book. You could get to it in the morning and know that you didn't really have much else to interrupt you.
Yes, that's right. But something, it's quite intense, I think, working on a book like that. Just because I'm not writing perhaps in my normal academic style. I'm continually trying to simplify and find as few words as possible to get the clear message across. So I think that aspect of it was quite tiring, and it meant that short bursts were a really good way of tackling it. And you will have seen each chapter is really short, so it was quite nice to work on a chapter at a time. And sometimes I was just paring down, and sometimes I was thinking, what graphic was going to represent this particular concept the best, so they have the fewest possible words. So it was sort of fits and starts. It was a really good way, of putting that together.
I can imagine that's quite a helpful task in terms of really melting everything down to its most key ideas or key aspects of the point. And that could actually help us in explaining something to another person or a young person or a singer that we're working with, just to get the fundamentals in, and not worry about the essays and the other pages of books that you've read, but really just focus in and home in on the point that we're making.
Yes, and I hope that teachers will feel that the same, and that they'll use various pages of the book and use some of the diagrams to explain concepts to children. And I tried to make it as visual as possible. So the warm-up is just set out in a little flow chart. So you go through these 4 stages, And the same with the cool down. There's a little diagram there to sort of, hopefully it's something that people will refer back to over and over again. It's not just a book that you read once, then put on the shelf. It's something that you can continually refer to.
Yeah. And speaking of the illustrations, they were done by your dad. How is that working with him?
Yes, I know. Well, we don't live near each other, so it was all done by telephone conversation and post. And he spent time as an architect, so he has really great technical drawing ability. And it was really important to me to find an illustrator who understood the crucial nature of the technical drawings. So he was a great choice from that point of view. I mean, very convenient to have one's father helping, but it was very much because of the technical drawings. I wanted someone who understood that I needed the anatomy to be just so, and that when drawing people, I wanted to have the proportions and the diagrams to be exactly right. Other people use illustrations differently, and there are lots of fantastic books with fun illustrations, which I think are great. But from the point of view of this book, it was very much sort of the infographic and the technical drawing that was really key to my concept. So he was a great person to use. It was the first time he's got involved in this side of drawing, but he was up for it, which was great. And we went backwards and forwards a few times by post. And he came down when lockdown lifted, and we spent some time together in the house just going through some of the drawings. But the nice thing was I could really ask him for anything, and he'd be up for it and give it a go. So I felt that I wasn't confined by an illustrator's own ideas. I was allowed to effectively say exactly what I wanted, and he was very obliging.
Yeah, you had daughter-dad points.
This is it.
So how long did it take from the moment you decided to write the book to having the completed thing in your hands?
2 years. It was a long process, partly because we were constricted by some of the lockdown issues. And it just meant that some of the aspects of publishing didn't go as fast as I had hoped they might. And there were some problems along the way, some delays along the way. And perhaps more than 2 years now, I think, on it. Yeah, I think it might even have been longer than that for various things to be sorted out. So the typesetting and then the jacket design, all of these things take time, and different people get involved in different parts of the construction of the book. And it seems to be done in different countries as well. So I learned a lot about book publishing along the way.
Yeah. And did your dad do the cover design as well?
No, that was someone entirely separate that my publisher already had a relationship with. And he took charge of that, which is great because, one really needs the publishing professional to get that right.
So how was the process in getting a publisher?
Surprisingly easy. I think I was very, very lucky that, as it happens, Compton Publishing were they're specialists in my area, which is really great because I did research how you get a publisher, and it looked pretty stressful. how we've all read the stories about Harry Potter got published after the sort of 50th publisher turned it down, haven't we? And so I was sort of under the impression that I probably might have to approach many, many different publishing houses and have lots of rejections. But I started with Compton Publishing just because I knew that they published the sort of books that I was writing. And partly the reason I knew that is that my bookshelves are full of books that they've published because I was using their books as references to what I was writing. So it was one of those circumstances where it just happened to be the right book for the right publisher. And even though Compton don't specialise in children's books, they do specialise in technical books about the voice. And it's good for me to align myself with that particular niche publishing house. So I was very lucky. It was almost an instant yes, which was really great. And I was absolutely thrilled. And I suppose that really gave me the impetus to get on with it and get it finished and get it published. So I was very lucky there.
I've always thought if I wrote a book, who would I trust as my beta readers? So who did you give that to when it was the first little emblem of something?
Yeah, well, it comes back to the children themselves. So each of the chapters was looked at by a cross-section of children, a cross-section of ages of children, ranging from age 10 up to age 18. And they had the opportunity to give me feedback, which was just, incredibly useful and really exciting for them, I think, to be involved, and just brilliant for me. And I wouldn't do it any other way. I think if you're writing a book for children, you just have to get feedback from your target audience. I think if I was going to give one piece of advice to authors, I'd say get feedback from your target audience, because I think that's the key to success with this sort of book.
What other advice would you give to the voice teacher who would really like to write a book themselves on one of their particular expert topics? You've already said get answers or get feedback from your target audience. What else would you say to them?
In order to be credible, I think you really do have to make sure that you are an expert in the area. And I worked really hard to make sure that I felt confident that I had read everything I could possibly read. And that did involve an exhaustive trawl through many, many articles written in many journals, and just making sure that I really did understand the scope of the world of children's vocal health out there, and loads and loads. I mean, sort of 99% of that didn't even get anywhere near the book, but I did feel that I was, I felt that I was empowered to write through that acquired knowledge. So I think that's important. And yes, certainly, journal articles are really important, and other books that have been written on the subject as well. I mean, from the point of view of other books, you don't really want to be repeating what other people have said. So it's certainly worth doing some research and making sure that you've acquired or at least looked at other books from your area. But then if there's nothing else, then if you think it's going to be useful, go for it. It's really worthwhile. And I would say that the children's market isn't overcrowded, and there's certainly scope, I would say, there for books about various. Well, in fact, my book is supposed to be the first in a series, as it happens. So I'm quite excited about the future. My publisher has very kindly suggested that I might like to write another book or two quite soon, perhaps. And we'll look at we'll do some research and look at what might be the best topic to cover next. I've got a few ideas, but I'll have to decide what's going to be the one that has the most burning reasons for choosing it. So that's the future.
Because this is going to be part of the My Voice Matters series.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So what are you currently thinking is making the list of maybes in terms of topic?
Gosh, there were so many possible directions in which I can go. And my publisher and I have had a few conversations already. And I've got a few drafts kicking around. Nothing's ready quite yet, because we're going to spend the rest of this year promoting this book and hopefully getting some sales. But yes, next year I shall be getting on with the next book in the series, and hopefully it will be really helpful and really useful and just cover another area of singing that's relevant to children and young people. Although some people who've read the book have come back and said, we need one for older people. I'll have to see whether we also go in that direction as well. So I definitely have to have those conversations with my publisher before I get going.
Yeah. And is Dad going to be rehired?
Yes, why not? He was very biddable last time.
Awesome. You're about to delve back into research mode then. So where do you go for your research papers?
Yes, so I'm lucky that I'm alumni of various universities, and they allow access to their libraries, and JSTOR's a great place to start. Lots of papers there. I also belong to various different online journal links, and I'm lucky enough to be able to access journals that way, which is really fantastic. I mean, journals really are the sort of gold standard of places, the places to start. But I'm also keeping my ear to the ground as to what books are being published at the moment on the topics in which I'm interested, because it's definitely worth keeping up with recent publications.
Well, we wish you all the very best with that project. But for now, where can we purchase a copy of A Young Person's Guide to vocal health, and how much is it going to cost us?
Yes, so it's £10, and plus postage and packing from whoever you happen to have it supplied by. You can go directly to the publisher, comptonpublishing.co.uk. I'm sure the address will be in the links. There's also Banks Music Publications who will send that out to you along with any sheet music that you wish to purchase, and they're brilliant and have been fantastically helpful. And I'm lucky, actually, that Banks Music Publications published me as a composer as well. So it's a lovely relationship to have there. Or if you'd like to get in touch with me via social media, I do have a box of books, and I'm very happy to pop one in the post for you. So that's the best place for now. And I think in due course, it will become more widely available.
Great. And just remind us of where we can get in touch with you for that.
Find me on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, all the usual areas, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Olivia Sparkhall, all those places. You'll find me. Got a website as well. So I think that's going to go in the link too. So you'll find me there.
Yes. Well, for now, Olivia Sparkhall, thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure, Alexa. It was lovely speaking with you.
You too. And we wish you all the best. We'll be looking with beady eyes for your My Voice Matters series in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.